Up, everyone. Uh, uh, press press conferences in the locker room, and this is the start of obviously the season. Congrats on the win. Something you're definitely not part of the interesting part. Uh, Falkers, man, it's lost. Long, long, to say the least. I'm looking at myself here. Yeah, like 10 years in the last 2 months. But here we are. We're going to talk a little bit here. Sound quality poor. Um, All right, I'm gonna try to talk up a little bit more. Is that any better? Whoever is can listening, I'm trying to. There's some people like around me, so I was trying to talk a little bit light, a little bit softer, I should say. Better now. All right, I'll do my best here to talk up a little bit. Okay, cool, 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 cool. Um, okay, cool. All right. Obviously, as the deal, as the deal, as always, pop in any questions, comments you have here. We'll I'll try to respond as best I can. Just as a quick, sort of lay of the land. I know I've been a little quiet in terms of the chatting and the podcasting for those of you who double dip on these things the last couple days. It's between New Year's and trying to work on a few things, including like that Cliff Kingsbury story that I dropped today. It's going to be, it's been a little tough. And tomorrow we've got Adam Peters and Dan Quinn talking probably about 5 o'clock, give or take. But like it's starting around like 9 in the morning is when the locker room clean out. So we'll talk to the players then. So tomorrow's going to be a long day. Once we get past all of that, I think we'll get into a better rhythm here. And I'll establish a certain sort of a day and a time to do these things, and maybe come up with some other ways to interact with you guys. All right. All that said, I don't really know what there's much to say about the game. If you saw the post game story that I wrote, I didn't focus on the game almost at all. I focused on questions that needed to be asked tomorrow to Dan Quinn and Adam Peters. Not necessarily that they're going to give us the answers that we're looking for, but to, um, you know, to ask whether it's what's going to happen with the coordinators. Um, what about like, this roster was the oldest in the league, and I think that really hurt the upside. The Jaden Daniels of it all, and of course, just basically what the hell happened this year. I think these are a lot of important questions. We hear from Dan Quinn, 3 or 4 times a week. We have not heard from Adam Peters since literally training camp eve in July. So a lot has happened since we last heard from him. And again, he's a guy that was reared in Bill Belichick's world. So I'm not expecting him to be overly expansive at any level, but at the same time, I think it's important to get some questions answered by him. Um, I don't know what there is to say about the game other than the fact that they won. And I'm with the majority of, well, I shouldn't say the majority. I'm with anybody here who thinks that that was not great. I don't blame the players. I don't blame the coaches. But somebody in the organization, I think, needs to step up and say, hey, what are we doing? Why are we winning this game? You got to be happy for, like, say, a guy like Josh Johnson. It's literally only the second time in his career that as a starting quarterback, he won a game. I'm not going to discount that as from a human level. You had moments like Bobby Wagner gets his 2000th tackle, Von Miller gets a sack, which moves him to ninth, tied for ninth all time on the career sacks list in the league, and he get like a $500K bonus. Chris Rodriguez, John Bates scored touchdowns. Bates is first in several years. Jeremy Reeves, first interception since 2020 or something like that. All that's important. Young whoever played, whatever. But That's for the players. That's the individuals. That's up to them. To me, if I ran the world, somebody higher up, not necessarily the owner, but somebody needs to, hey, what are we doing? You know, they're on a third string quarterback who's 39 years old. So it's not like, I mean, it's not like they had Jaden Daniels out there. And by the way, if Jaden Daniels had been playing, I wouldn't feel the same because him getting reps is a different deal than a guy who could be retired or all those things. So I asked Dan Quinn, I remember a couple weeks ago, this wasn't about the draft, but I've been harping on like sort of the Jordan McGee of it all, Ben Sinnott before Zach Ertz getting hurt, things like that. Hey, don't these guys need to play? And and more specifically, the point was, hey, you're going to be here next year, Dan Quinn. Shouldn't you, while simultaneously trying to help your guys win today, in terms of like, they're the individual, shouldn't you be thinking bigger picture? Because this season's lost. I mean, whatever you're going to get out of the rest of the season does not compare to potentially what you can do next season. And, and to be clear, I always hear people say to me, well, you can always get so and so was picked in the back of the first round or was a late, Kirk Cousins was a fourth round pick or whatever. That is completely irrelevant. That's not the point. The point is the opportunity. The opportunity to do certain things. If you have the fifth pick, it's simply a better opportunity to get more value for a trade, right? If you're the fifth pick and the seventh pick, and both in cases that you want to trade down, you're going to get more for the fifth pick than the seventh pick, barring somebody making a goofy trade. So that opportunity cost is now a bit lost. Now, all that said, the seventh pick is good in a sport in which, you have 22 starters on, in a game. The seventh pick could mean the first, whatever, quarterback, receiver, whatever it might be. So it's not like they're going to get, if they want to stay there, they'll get a good player in theory. But the opportunity cost to me, I just, and by the way, this also ties in. If you've listened to me, like I constantly complain about things like, why is Chris Moore still playing versus putting in Jacoby Jones on the practice squad? They had Donovan Edwards, the running back from Michigan, on the practice squad all year. Again, I get it. Maybe he's not all that, and maybe, he's not somebody that they think will ever be better than Husky Merritt or Chris Rodriguez, whatever. Chase Edmonds is on the roster, or those are things that drive me crazy. And they'll continue to drive me crazy. In the grand scheme of things, again, the draft order is now what it is. They've got the seventh pick, and they'll move forward. The bigger question is going to be on that front. They find a way to get more picks because right now they only have 2 in the top 100. And if you're trying to get younger and more talented, that's a tough way to go. So we'll see what they ultimately do down the line. See here, you got some comments here. Shane, do I think we will hear anything on Kingsbury this week, whether he stays or whether he goes? So it's hard to say. I don't know where they are in their evaluation process on anything, right? They already got a head start on the defensive play caller. They need a defensive coordinator. I know I've seen reports saying that Joe Witt could be out. I mean, I don't even know what that means. He's already out. It's just a matter of, is he going to be with the staff anymore or not? Presumably he won't have that title and somebody else will. If you didn't see it yet, Raheem Morris, the Atlanta Falcons head coach, was fired today. Raheem Morris and Dan Quinn go back to Atlanta? Yeah, or whatever. Yeah, they have a tie. So I think that's an obvious name to keep in mind. And I think with the defensive coordinator in particular, and I'll get to Cliff, I know that was the question. The defensive coordinator, I think the question is, does Dan Quinn stay with his system, or does he think I need to move to something new? So there's some obvious guys if he wants to stay within his group, Raheem Morris, Al Harris, who's with the Bears, some other guys. But if you want to go outside the box and do something completely different, that's where things can get pretty interesting. Whether it's if the Browns fire their people, Jim Schwartz has been a good defensive coordinator in the league, or if it's some younger guy who's not done it before, all that's in play. Now, as far as Kingsbury goes, I'm curious what you guys think. If you're listening here right now, you presumably read what I wrote about this. I know the Athletic, Diana Rossini put something out there yesterday. I'm not saying this to be a schmuck, but like, it's one paragraph with no context. He heard somebody say something, I presume, and that's it. I don't know how many of you listened to the press conferences with Quinn and the coordinators. For the last few weeks, I've been kind of like asking questions of Quinn, of Kingsbury, getting sort of to the point of what do we think of the offense? And this past week in particular, I asked them both individually, what's your confidence level in this offense? Because I always kept coming back to in my head, if offense is so good, if this is the way to go, why is nobody else in the league doing anything close to it? And if you saw the numbers in the story I wrote, they are by far all Kingsbury offenses, not just this year. Any year he's been in the league running an offense, his teams by far have more, they use more shotgun and more no huddle than anybody, but yet nobody else is doing it. Now, everybody else could be wrong. It was incredibly successful last year, but part of this is not just about the moment; it's about the long term. What's the sustainability? Um, our pal Grant Paulson last year, sure some of you maybe recall, he was all about getting not just Ben Johnson here. He was all about getting any offensive coordinator because his theory was, as the head coach, because his theory was if the offensive coach, if the offensive coordinator leaves to get a head coaching job, if there's success, like say if Kingsbury leaves to take another job, now you have to start over there. There's some truth to that, but ultimately I don't really think it makes that much of a difference. But if you have somebody from a Shanahan system, there's lots of guys who are with that. Kingsbury is almost a one of one with this. There's like if he leaves today, let's just say he gets hired by Atlanta to be their head coach or whatever. Who's doing that? You can't say David Blau. I think David Blau would go with Kingsbury, but he's not been a coach for more than 10 seconds. So literally, it's almost like a one of one, and therefore, what do you are you setting yourself up for a problem? Even though let's just say Kingsbury leaves for a better job. No, you Zach Berman for Eagles guru. How did you guys blow that one? That they don't want the 2 seed? Well, congrats to them for rest. All right. So, sorry, my pal Zach, who covers Eagles for the Athletic, was just walking by, and yeah, it's weird how like we're all focused on the Commanders maybe blew the draft pick, and the Eagles blew the 2 seed. I'm sure everybody on some level would rather probably reverse these things, but it is what it is. In any event, I don't know that we're going to hear anything with about Kingsbury tomorrow. I honestly would kind of doubt it unless this thing is even further along than I think. And just to be clear, like for me, and this was sort of the way the Brian Robinson situation unfolded for me, it's just something it just sort of clicked in my brain. Thought about it for a while, and as I just kind of kept letting it percolate and simmer and think, I it just made too much sense, both in the case of Winston and Upton. We saw how that went, and similar here. Now, I'm not as it's not a matter of saying that I think Kingsbury should go. I don't necessarily think that, but I do question, like as I said, where is this going? So I don't know that we're going to hear anything about this tomorrow, maybe not even this week. I would imagine they would probably rather not fire him and that he would get another job should it go down that path. But I do think it's a pretty interesting question. And I think the thing that would be, let's just say they did decide to move on for reasons I've established or things I wrote about. I don't know what changed. It's not as if he arrived projecting to do one thing and then completely did something else. This is exactly who he is, the system that he runs. There's no ambiguity. So I'm not sure what would be changed unless it was just simply whether it was Peters or whether it was Quinn said, okay, now that they've seen under the hood for a bit, it's not for them. Maybe, but that all that seems a little bit weird to me. Let's see here. We got a long one here. Chris Fowler. You and Nikki the other day mentioned on your pod concerns about training camp. I've also heard on the radio people like Doc Walker intimate that this is a soft coaching staff? What's the truth? Does this team need to rethink how they approach the offseason? Well, I did get the question. Um, I was not covering an NFL team in sort of the Oklahoma drill days of Marty Schottenheimer, you know, uh, just yesteryear, when guys were coming in from their regular jobs, like 9 to 5 jobs, or working as a salesman or whatever they were doing, to then get ready. So training camps were a lot longer. They were more grueling, more physical because they had to get guys in shape. That's obviously no longer the case. These guys are all in shape year round, and there are also more limitations on what they can or can't do. That said, it to me, based on all the context I know, there's a Verlugas now walking by. A lot of stars coming by here today. Um, to me, it felt light. Now, if Doc Walker saying that, clearly, back when he was playing, no doubt that it is light. So I do wonder about the approach, I've talked about this before. One thing that stood out to me was one of my favorite parts of any training camp is watching the linemen go head to head. You know, one offensive lineman, one defensive lineman. You know, like they're in the ring, just quick hit. Who can stop who can get past who, whatever. And I think they did it like one time, maybe twice, like in very brief amounts of times. It's to be a staple. And to me, maybe that's not the biggest deal. Maybe they don't think that particular drill matters, but I think it kind of does. To me, it's sort of symbolic. So yes, I do think there needs to be potential change in what they do. But there's probably a lot of other things that need to happen beyond that. But certainly, hey, and this is also partly why I think the Kingsbury thing is interesting. To me, everything should be on the table. You're well, I guess now to remember they're 5 wins, they're 5-12. There should be almost nothing that is, not worthy of discussion. Even Jaden Daniels. I mean, I'm not worrying about Jaden Daniels, but obviously there was at no point this year where we're like, it wasn't like one game. We're like, wow, that's what we saw last year. And then the injuries screwed things up. Never quite got that. So what was going on there? Again, was it the offense? Was it the receivers being all hurt and the lack of depth there? All these kinds of things. So I think everything should be on the table. No, Jaden should not be. They should not get another quarterback. I don't mean that on any level. Let's just be clear. But anyway, so there's that. All right, let me see what else we got here. Um, John Feldman was hiring Cliff, the no huddle shotgun approach, in an attempt to cater to Jaden's perceived strengths. Are they confident he could play as well in a different system? So maybe Adam Peters definitively knew they were going to take Jaden Daniels, but this was like they hired Cliff in February of 24. The draft was 2 months later. If they already knew. I don't think so. I know Dan Quinn said at the time that he just having gone up against Cliff in Arizona, that he always thought it was a challenging offense to deal with, and I think it can be for sure. When it's well, again, we just saw it last year. It's not like we all have to go, look in the recesses of our brains to find. We don't have to go to look at NFL films to find footage of working. It worked really well last year. I just think there's a question of sustainability. It's very modern thinking, at least to a degree. But if you saw the article, that you saw this, but when I looked to see in this century, uh, what were the most, sort of up tempo teams, the Kingsbury teams were his teams were all in the top. You know, these two wise teams, I think they were 3 and 4, I want to say. Chip Kelly's teams were 1, 2, 5, and somewhere else pretty high up, maybe 6. And it's another example of a system where this up tempo system. Of course, Chip Kelly came from college as well. He was at New Hampshire, which is where he developed this. And all these sort of quasi gimmicky systems make sense for the teams that don't have the talent. When Mike Leach at Texas Tech, Kingsbury's mentor, came up with this, Texas Tech is trying to compete with Texas and Oklahoma and Nebraska back in the day, and those kinds of schools. They didn't have the talent. They had to find ways to minimize the talent gap. That's not the case here in the NFL. All these guys are tremendous athletes. They all essentially have the same level of talent. It's just a matter of, there's very, look, this team was NFC Championship game last year. They lost in this stadium. I'm here in this stadium again. They have 5 wins. So everybody kind of has the same level of talent. There's just a few differences here and there. So the idea of having sort of the quasi, again, I don't say gimmick, but like quasi gimmick system to me just doesn't make as much sense. I, I don't want to sit here and act like Iron Cliff is bad again. They really crushed last year. It was a lot of fun to watch, as we all remember. But over time, I just don't know that this system at this level, 'cause college is different, but this level, um, I don't know. But anyway, I think I'm not too worried about what they think about Jaden in any system. The good thing about Jaden, I've always thought, is let's just say running was off the table. I think he has enough accuracy, arm talent, vision, all these things to to succeed out of the pocket. Obviously, it would lose um, some of the upside and the potency, but I'm not worried about that. But again, we'll see what happens here uh, next. All right, so it's 9:45. I need to drive home, and I need to get ready because tomorrow, again, locker room cleanup starts around 9. So I never want to complain to you guys about this because obviously I get to do something that's pretty fun, and I'm sure a lot of people would like to do it. But sleep is sleep, and I got to drive 2.5 hours to get home. So I'm going to sort of cut it here. I really appreciate you guys. And again, thank you for sticking with me. I know I recognize a lot of the names here who've been coming to every time I do a live chat or anything like this or comment on the message boards. It means a lot. The diehards and to see new names as well. It means a lot. We're gonna kill it here in the off season. I think the Cliff story is just one example as to how we're going to be different than everybody else because we're not just going to sort of take what somebody says and just write, so and so said this happened and this said that they should be like this. We're going to examine it. We're going to think about it. We're going to look at it, and we'll see. And again, I'm not guaranteeing that they make a change at OC, but I think even just the idea that it should is up for debate, I think it could probably surprise a lot of people. And from my sense, even after I wrote, I think I'm on. Pretty sure I'm on to something. What that means ultimately, time will tell. Whether that time is tomorrow, I couldn't tell you. But again, Adam Peters, Dan Quinn tomorrow. Once we get through tomorrow, we'll get a good schedule here going as far as live chats, podcasts, all that good stuff. Cool? Cool. You guys rock. If you got friends out there who are pissed off about how things are going and are ready for all the offseason stuff, look, who does the mock drafts? Who does, you know, deep dives into free agency? Who predicts things like Brian Robinson getting moved on? Fine. That's it for me. You guys rock. You guys on the flip side. Um, safe trip home. Thanks for keeping us in the loop. You guys rock. I appreciate it. We'll talk soon. See ya.